Why is it important that we need processes in place?
Absolutely. So for any business to grow, let alone scale, process needs to be repeatable.
Mm.
We start, if let's use a startup example in the garage, the great idea, two or three people, you're doing everything and you've built a business, you brought a product or service to market and somebody's buying it. And then you bring more people on until you have a process that's documented, and I'll use, written on paper. You can't teach it to somebody else. You can't ensure that somebody else will do it the exact same way. And until processes are truly repeatable, they are absolutely not scalable. So understanding what you do, how to do it well, why it's done, and for me, most important, what value will your customer derive from that process? You don't have process.
Today's episode is one you're going to love, especially if you've ever felt stuck in the day-to-day chaos of leadership and wondered, is there a better way to lead? Today, I'm joined by Lisa L. Levy, founder of L Cube Consulting, best-selling author and creator of the Adaptive Transformation Framework. Lisa is known for helping leaders and leadership teams break everything strategically, challenging the status quo and rethinking the way we lead as we can scale, innovate, and thrive. In today's conversation, we'll explore how to align people, processes, and technology so your organization can grow without burning you out. We'll talk about how to build self-reliant teams, lead through disruption, and embrace innovation even when it feels uncomfortable. If you've ever wanted to spend less time firefighting and more time leading with vision and purpose, this episode will give you the clarity and tools to make that shift. Let's jump in. Do you wish that you could lead your team in a way that honors and glorifies God? Are you struggling to overcome self-doubt as a leader and have a desire to be more confident in your role? Welcome to the Woman of Faith in Leadership podcast. I'm Rika, and for the last decade, I've experienced my fair share of managing challenging employees and teams in middle management leadership roles. I committed my leadership journey to God, and it changed everything. And I'm ready to share everything I've learned with you. Now, if you're ready to lead your team in a way that honors God, grab that notebook and pen, and don't forget your chai latte, and let's dive in. Welcome, Lisa, to the Woman of Faith in Leadership podcast. How are you today?
Rika, I'm fabulous, and thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation today.
It is such a big pleasure. I'm always extremely blessed to have guests on the show, especially from another country. I just think that God's so amazing to put women together to talk about different things, leadership, to different things that are related to leadership. And so, yeah, on that note, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Let them know who you are, where you're from, and what is the topic that we'll be talking about today.
Absolutely. I am Lisa L. Levy. I am the preferred disruption and innovation catalyst, founder of L Cubed Consulting. And really what I'm here to talk with you about today is what it means to break everything strategically in your business so that you can achieve operational excellence. I like the idea of playing with puzzles, and I consider everything as sort of like a Rubik's Cube, right? We're turning the dials and we're moving things around, trying to get the right order of things to get the results that we're looking for. And in our minds, when we think about a Rubik's Cube, we often think, gosh, I want all of the white side, I want it all white, and the blue side all blue. But if you turn it just the right way, there are different patterns that can emerge. And sometimes it's the mixing of things that's the most important. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how I believe that when you take people plus process and multiply with technology, you can achieve growth and scale.
Ooh, that's sounds very interesting. Right up my alley. I love things like that. I love the fact that technology has given us such a upper hand in terms of the way that we can deal with our SOPs and our processes and things these days. And it's very interesting because I actually recently spoke to someone who joined a brand new, it's actually, the company is old. So the company is 40 years old. And when they joined, everything is still paper-based. Literally every single thing is still paper-based. Nothing is online. There's so few things that are online. And they were just scratching their head thinking, well, this company has really not gone with the times. And as a result, is their onboarding process was actually pretty bad in comparison to some of the other places that this person has worked because of technology. It's like you can't believe that this person or the CEO or the business owner just decided he was not going to go online. So yeah, I'm very interested in this topic that you have for us today. So I don't know, where do we start? You tell me. This is very good. I think there's so many things to unpack there.
Oh my gosh. So, let's, I guess, start with a story.
Mm-hmm. Good. Like
So,
stories.
I love a good story. Here's hoping it's a good story for the audience. Um, so I want to take us back in time a little bit. It's March in 2020. And I'm working with a client and they are preparing to go and shut down their business for 2 weeks. The CEO, Sarah, has brought everybody together in this virtual world that this national US based team has never met in Teams or Zoom. And there are about 36 different little faces in the squares looking a little bit confused. And Sarah's looking a little tired and a little stressed. And she's starting to ask her leaders, what are we going to do? We're going to shut down a food distribution company for 2 weeks. And as I'm watching, there's this one gentleman and he's waving his hands frantically, and everybody just sort of stops. And Sarah says, "Okay, Brian, what have you got to, you want to say something?" He jumps in and he's like, "Sarah, I'm standing in a food distribution warehouse. There's 15,000 square feet of food that if we shut the doors for 2 weeks, I'm going to come back and this place is going to stink. It's all going to go to waste because our customers are also shutting down their businesses. We can't let this happen." And Sarah was like, for the first time in days, I'd seen her smile. And she said, looks at Brian, she says, "Brian, that is what we're here to talk about." He goes, "No, no, no, there's more because I have an idea. And my idea is we have food and we're going to, everything in our world is shutting down. People are going to be hungry. And people who are hungry today are really going to be hungry when all of the normal places are closed. We have to do something really different." He said, "We just have to figure out how to move our food from our warehouses to places where there are people who are hungry. And it's not the restaurants and it's not the convention centers and it's not our typical clients, but I know that there's a way." And in that moment, Sarah was so excited. I hadn't seen her actually excited in days because this was looming, right? This was going to be earth shattering. If we think back to where we were when everybody said the world has just stopped, she was shutting down a national company. And Brian said, we can do this. I know we can do this." And Sarah stopped and she smiled, and everybody else is really intent on what she's talking about because this is so bizarre. And she said, "Okay, everybody, Brian has just sort of skipped ahead to what we're here to talk about today, because today we're talking about ideas. We're talking about how we're going to do things that we have never, ever even thought of doing before because we don't know what's going to happen next." And so she sent Brian off with a group of people for the next day to figure out how to prototype and test this idea, to conduct an experiment. So if he could figure out where the food shelters were, the pantries, different places where they could distribute things and make it work, they could do that around the country across different regions and make sure that they were helping and supporting the community. This was an experiment. It was the beginning of what I like to call an innovation engine. Now, I just want to frame this a little bit. Sarah swore to me for months that there was no reason that in the food distribution industry there was ever a reason to innovate. They knew what they were doing, they know how to do it, and they have fabulous metrics. But all of a sudden, the world changed. And she, in a moment, took a leap of faith and did what she thought was going to be right. And that was to empower her team to think outside the box, to challenge the status quo and do what's right. It was a lot of things. There were a lot of things this wasn't. It was not profitable. It was labor intensive. It was asking people, as we started to understand, to step into potentially harm's way and not be at home and be safe, but to take care of their communities. And it was a beautiful experience that set the tone for them to continuously innovate. And that is the beginning of everything for any business.
Wow. And I think the so profound thing that you were saying is the fact that it's something that was never done before. I think that's the daunting and the scary thing in any leadership role, whether it's for your own business or whether it's for a company that you work for. Sometimes we have to step out of our comfort zone to do things that we've never done before. And for me, that is leadership on a day-to-day basis. So let's unpack that story a little bit further, because I think when it comes to innovation and then, so technology, in the first instance, people were meeting from across the country on Microsoft Teams, which was so good because ages ago it was Skype. Everybody used Skype. And then, thanks to COVID, Zoom became a more and more well-known and more popular. People moved on, and Microsoft Teams became, I know Microsoft Teams because I was during the COVID period working at a school, and it's like just bam, woof, all the technology stuff. What an amazing opportunity for any company. COVID was horrible in all senses, but it created this idea that, wow, technology can actually be our friend. So let's start that. So in that situation, because I love to hear the end of that story. Like, did they end up, was that experiment successful? How did technology play a role in that, and innovation? And do you know if that company went on, or that leader, or Brian even, or Sarah went on to innovate more? So that's what I'm curious about.
Well, so Brian's experiment was successful, and they did find that they were able to move things from their distribution centers to different places. But then there's another challenge that presented itself, right? They were designed to support restaurants, and so large packages, right? Big quantities of items. And during that period, what were some of the things that were most necessary, right? We needed hand sanitizer and gloves, and masks and things that they actually had for food handling, that those things were used, but they had them in bulk quantities. And so they couldn't necessarily distribute those, but they, for lack of a better word, donated them to supermarkets and other places where there was the need, where there were employees who needed to protect themselves. And so there was a series of clever solutions that presented itself over the time and kept a percentage of their employees busy and contributing and not panicking and not at home and stir crazy. And it was a fabulous, fabulous opportunity. I'll also be honest, right? It is a big company, multi-billion-dollar entity. And when business as usual returned, business as usual returned. And so those were things that were done for a period of time to figure things out and to invest in the community, which was beautiful and brilliant, but was not a business model and not something that they were going to be able to do long term, nor should they. That was not their purpose in existence. But it did change the leadership team's ability to say, hey, I thought about this thing, or I have an idea, and it opened up a dialogue in a way that they had never had before, that allows them to continuously test new ideas and figure out which things work and which things don't.
Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful, because I think if one thing that COVID taught a lot of us, and specifically me, my takeaway word from that COVID period is the word perspective. Like, we all got perspective on, the fact that, okay, what's important in life, we can talk about the personal stuff, but I think from a business perspective and from a leadership perspective, I got a lot of perspective that, wow, the way I've been thinking about things is so boxed in. It's like in a box. Like, when you are forced to think outside of the box, which is literally what COVID was, we had to do things that we'd never done before. We had to write SOPs that we'd never thought in our wildest dreams we would ever have to write. we had stuff in place, emergencies for flooding, for earthquakes, for all these things, but we didn't have anything in place for a pandemic. And so I like the fact what you had said, that it actually, that multi-billion-dollar company had to do something that was out of their scope, which was, it was a great thing. It was supporting the community, but they were not a not for profit. They were actually a for profit company. Exactly. And all of a sudden, the whole mindset of what our purpose is changed. So, and I think that's so good, because that's, to me, what innovation is. Innovation is being willing to change your mindset about something, and not being stuff, and to say we've always done it this way, like we're just going to keep the status quo, we're not going to change, that, in that. So I'm thinking, what about those leaders who are new? So they didn't experience COVID, they didn't experience the challenges what COVID brought. And I do actually have a lot of listeners who are anything from about brand new Christians, brand new leaders, 10 weeks into their leadership role, to people who have been in leadership for a very long time. So I'm thinking about those people who are new, they haven't experienced that, that whole challenge that COVID brought. Like, how can we help them, Lisa? How can we get them to start thinking about innovation and to think outside of the box? Because I think sometimes when we step into leadership, we have mentors and we have coaches, but we also learn from them. And sometimes those people are still stuck as well. So, yeah.
It's a great question, and something that I was strangely talking about earlier today, right? The pandemic, kind of that experience was like a rubber band, and we stretched. And some rubber bands broke, to be honest, right? But those
Really?
that didn't, right? We went out to the kind of that end, and we're constricting back down to the way we've always done things. And I am so personally frustrated by that mindset, because who looks backwards to go forwards? And trying to go back to butts and seats and all of these old paradigms that we have, to your point, an emerging workforce that came to maturity during the pandemic, right? They were graduating from school and becoming adults. And they're now 5 years into their careers going, I don't know what this was before, but what's happening today sucks.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work for me. And I am so impressed with the emerging Gen Z leaders and their willingness to say, yeah, I'm not going to do it this way. Just because it's comfortable for all of you who created it, it is not comfortable for us. And they're not just taking it. I think back on myself in my early 20s and into my early 30s when I started taking on leadership roles, and the mindset was, yes, please give me more. What more can I take on? Yes. There was no thought of saying no. That's an unreasonable expectation, especially, let's own it, as a female. I came up in the IT industry. I was the first female director, the only female director on the leadership team.
Oh, wow.
I was one of the boys, right? I learned how to play that way, play their way, and that's not okay.
No.
And this generation today won't take it, and I have so much respect for that. And as I hear the stories, and there's moments where I cringe inside, going, I can't believe you weren't fired on the spot.
Yeah.
Like, oh, things may actually be changing. People are hearing that it's not okay to expect unreasonable things. And people who can define their boundaries are being successful navigating the workspace and growing into leadership because they have skills and capabilities and are more emotionally intelligent than the previous generations might have been at their stage in their careers.
Yeah, that's so true. I was actually talking to somebody about this yesterday, actually. It's so good how these conversations intertwine, because we were talking about emotional intelligence in today's workforce in comparison to ages ago. Because ages ago, you were not really allowed to own your emotions in the workplace. You were females. Again, wow, so good how this intertwines. Because I was saying someone that females were constantly trying to match up with the males in the workforce because they're so unemotional. And according to them, if you're unemotional, you can make good decisions. because I've also had somebody on, actually a client, who said to me that a man has actually said to her when she got emotional in a meeting. A man actually said to her, well, when you're more in control of your emotions, we will continue this conversation. And that has set off a series of events for her to think that, oh well, I can't be emotional at work. But she was actually just feeling extremely passionate about what she was talking about, and that brought emotion to her, because again, that's who we are as females. There's actually nothing wrong with that. But because of the generational differences, because of the way we grew up, because of the bias of ideas of what we have about leadership, and what that should look like, she struggles with that in her leadership role, but I believe that she'll make strides with that if she can work on that. And every other listener listening to the show, that person's not the anomaly. They're not the odd one out. Actually, this is just the norm. And I think as females, we should start owning who we are, who we've made to be. Obviously, it doesn't mean that we get to be over emotional and we get to be unprofessional and manipulative with our emotions. But I think we should start embracing who we are as females in the workforce and say, okay, this is who we are. This is just how we function, and it's okay. It's okay.
So we're going down a fun topic, going way back. So this will be anecdotal data, because this was like when I was in high school, I had to write a research paper on something that was kind of a paradigm that was shifting. And I picked the topic of female fighter pilots, because in the US at that stage, women were not allowed to be fighter pilots. But for the timing perspective, for those of you listening, this was shortly after the original Top Gun movie came out, and the idea of fighter pilots was very sexy and very appealing. And because we've just had another one of those movies hit, we all understand it's a very sexy movie, and we get swept up in it.
Yeah.
And I was really curious about women and why they weren't allowed to be fighter pilots, and it came down to that concept of emotion and not being able to be in control of emotion. And do you want a woman being able, with all of that firepower, flying around and having a moment? The research, when they actually started putting women in the planes and doing simulations and tests, and the data that was coming back, women were more aggressively lethal in the ways that they wanted men to be. And so every stereotype, every decision that was being made was based on a bias that was proven false. And ultimately, in this country, women do fly as fighter pilots, but the whole basis of everything had to turn 180 degrees. And still to this day, right, our emotions are seen as a weakness when the emotion is absolutely a strength. Who wants to get between a mother bear and her cub?
No one.
Right? So it's instinctive and it's natural, and it is something that when we understand and own it, it is, a strength for us.
Yeah, I can fully agree with you on that one. And I think if as females we start embracing it and stop seeing it as a weakness, start embracing it, then I think our perspectives would also change, and the way we lead people would also change, because then we're not going to see it as a weakness. And I mean, I've shared openly on the show as well about the one thing that made me emotional at work and that got me crying was that true frustration of, but I cannot do anything in this situation to fix this problem or to help, or it's out of my hands. It needs a solution. So that was the one thing. And I sometimes would cry in a meeting, and then I would have to say, oh, I'm really sorry, I would apologize for getting emotional, or and I still think that maybe it's got a place if you handle it correctly. So how I handled it correctly, I feel in the end, was I would say, oh guys, just getting emotional now because I feel really passionate about this, and there's a level of frustration in me that we can't make this situation better. So then I stopped actually apologizing for it per se. I then used to say, I'm getting emotional because I'm really passionate about that. And then people would leave me. They would accept that it is what it is, and I wouldn't make excuses for it anymore. And so, I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner, but unfortunately it was also maturity that got me to that position, so yeah.
Yeah, and there's no reason and no purpose and no benefit of apologizing for something that doesn't require an apology.
Correct.
Being passionate, and many women, right, the tears come from, as you described, frustration or anger. It's not weakness. It's
No.
an inability to get to an outcome because they're not being heard or given an opportunity to solve, right? And we like to solve. And yeah, it does not require in any way, shape, or form an apology.
No, because if men get angry, because people, so my husband and I have actually spoken about this before. Men get angry when their emotional reaction to things is anger. Our emotional reaction to things is to get teary about it. It's not a right or a wrong, but just because men get angry, they're not apologizing for getting angry. That's just their normal reaction. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting discussion. I think to continually have not just on this episode but on other episodes as well, because I think we truly need to start embracing who we are as women. So if we get back to processes, because that
Sure.
is I love our digression just there. That was awesome. I think that was meant to be. Why is it important that we need processes in place?
Absolutely. So for any business to grow, let alone scale, process needs to be repeatable. We start, if let's use a startup example in the garage, the great idea, 2 or 3 people, you're doing everything and you've built a business, you brought a product or service to market and somebody's buying it. And then you bring more people on until you have a process that's documented, and I'll use, written on paper. You can't teach it to somebody else. You can't ensure that somebody else will do it the exact same way. And until processes are truly repeatable, they are absolutely not scalable. So understanding what you do, how to do it well, why it's done, and for me, most important, what value will your customer derive from that process? You don't have process. And that last piece, that customer piece, is really important to businesses as we grow and scale, because we are really good at making processes. And we can create activity for the sake of activity that actually may not generate valuable results. And so when we're questioning and looking at what we do and why we do it, if the answer doesn't have some tie to the outcome, the product or service that our customers are buying from us, I question whether or not that process needs to exist. And that's where we have a tremendous amount of waste in what we do. And it's hard to sometimes peel back those whys to find oh, here's why it connects to our customer. And especially when you talk about HR and payroll and those back office functions that never actually touch the customer, that's where it's most important to make that connection, because that's where we can create the busy work and the activity, and it feels important but doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I think about the onboarding. Let's talk about that again. Like the first thing what was very important to me when I started creating an onboarding. So where I worked, I ran a brand new department, never existed before. And so, originally to get approval for that department to exist, they obviously had to create those SOPs at the beginning so that they could present them to the board. The board would then say, okay, yes, this is good to go, whatever. And but I had to change so many of those SOPs in the end, because they were just as a startup then. But when we realized that, oh wow, this is, like some of these processes or some of the steps that we were following was such a waste of time. There was so much better that you could do it. You could be more efficient, or you didn't even need the thing altogether, because sometimes we like to create those to-do lists and we just want to tick, 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 tick it, because there's that satisfaction about making a tick. But you are making so much more work for yourself if you've got all these processes in place that is just not necessary. So that was one of my biggest missions during the 5 years that I worked there, was to just break everything down, get it as simple as possible, and make sure that the onboarding process was really well, so that a person could actually then have their job be more efficient. But as a leader myself, my job would be more efficient too, because I know that that person had a great onboarding process, because then I didn't have to constantly scaffold. I didn't constantly have to go back and say, oh, but did you remember, or did you forget? And you still have to do that, because people are forgetful and they, don't always do the right thing. um, but I think that's the one thing that's most important about that. So now I was going to ask, oh yeah, and then what role, because we, those first two words that I wrote down here for myself was processes and technology. What role can technology play in processes? Because obviously, like I mentioned, that person, one of the listeners of the show, told me, oh, just joined a company that's, been there for 40 years, but that nothing's online. What can I do? What can I suggest, as a new person as well? So yeah, let's talk about that.
So, one thing I want to be really clear about is I love technology. Technology is fabulous and it enables good process. But if you don't have the right people doing the right work, it also enables bad things really well. So if you don't get the right people doing the right work, that process that we've just talked about being documented, being refined so that it is both effective and efficient, if you enable with technology, you get super fast bad, and nobody wants that. So as you've been talking about that company, 40 years old with no technology, right? The first thing in that scenario is really, really, really understanding the processes across all functions, across all people. So Rika, you know what you do, and you create something that I need to work off of, and then it moves down. We need to understand what you do, why you do it. Does it actually add value to me doing my job, or does it need to change? We need to tune all of those things before we find a technology solution. Everybody loves technology, and in startups we start to layer on this app for this and this app, and we start to layer all of these things, and often we reach a point of everything is getting harder, not easier, because we're not doing it intentionally. And so really making sure good process enabled by technology, and that the technology you've chosen, you use it to its fullest capabilities. Because so often we'll bring in a piece of software for one thing and a piece of software for something else. And now we have 5 or 10 different pieces of software where any one of them could probably have done 80% of what you were trying to do. So we create artificial complexity through, oh, there's an app for that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So thinking about, like going online, and because yes, we would onboard this app, and then we would do this app, and then because it's just so easy. So what would a leader who wants to, either move online or to move their processes to a different software, what are some things that they have to look out for when they're looking at a software?
So the most important thing, I think, is to understand what it is they want from it.
Mm.
And that sounds like a stupid thing because you want it to solve a business problem.
Yeah.
Right. But what is that business problem? I want to be more efficient with time. I want to do more with technology and less with people. I want to make more money, right? What is this tool? Because it is just a tool. What is it going to do for the business? And where does it fit in? And my favorite question, using it impacts our customer how? And so that's the first thing, right? What is the real business need? And then understanding and having a third party help you with this, an advisor, a consultant. This is a really good time to have somebody who is objective look at what's going on around, right? To understand and question your processes and what you're looking for to help you find the right solution, or to challenge, do you already have something in your environment that can do this? You just don't know it yet. So obviously I am a consultant. It's part of what I do. But it is important, an advisor, a coach, a somebody being able to help you ask those questions, because we can't always, sorry, here comes the cliche, we can't always see the forest for the trees
Yeah.
because we're so deep in it.
Yeah.
And objectivity is something that you can actually procure through a third party.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I have now seen the value in working as a consultant myself as well, but then also working with somebody else external who just has a different view on things than you. Because sometimes if you're in it, you cannot see the things that are going around you or the things that you are missing. So even when I was in that leadership role where I was starting the new department, I also had a consultant that I hired because he was the expert or could come in and see the things that I was missing. Because, I was in that leadership role for 5 years. So you get complacent and you can't see things anymore. So that whole last year, the first year that I was in that leadership role, I was working with that consultant, nearly every month. He was coming out every single month, sometimes every fortnight, to come and help me with some things. So is that what you do in your consultancy?
It is part of what we do. The consultancy, we have two aspects to our business. There is a consultancy where we work with really large organizations, like the story I told you about COVID, where we
Mm.
take teams in to do and help lead through change. We also have a coaching practice where we work with emerging leaders or growing and scale leadership teams that are storming and forming and trying to norm, and help them through that to reach what I consider a goal is self-reliance,
Mm.
where you have a founder, an owner, a CEO, a head of a division that has a team around them that is trying to deliver results, but they need to be empowered and able to do that without having to ask for permission. They need to be self-reliant. And so we do a tremendous amount of focus on that.
Awesome, that's so great. And I wasn't actually planning on like ending the show already yet, so I can, because it's kind of relevant. I'll just ask you, where can people get into contact with you if that was something that they'd be looking at, and then we can kind of continue with the conversation.
Okay. So what I guess I want to do, Rika, one of the things as I was looking at your podcast and as we've had this conversation today, I am so impressed with how committed you are to your audience. So I really want to make an offer, and I want to
Okay.
share with them a couple of things in a way that I've really never done before. So I am thinking this out as we're talking. So bear with me if I stumble a little bit, because there's something that I want to give here, and it's something that is part of the exclusive Self-Reliant Leadership Team program that we just sort of teased. And I want to give you two pieces of it, but you need to understand who it's for. So let me start with the ideal, who needs this? You're a founder, you're an executive, you are an organizational leader, and you feel like you're fighting fires all the time. You know what you want to accomplish, but you're stuck in that day-to-day chaos of, oh my gosh, it just isn't working. And you feel like everybody comes to you for the answer. It's exhausting, and you have really good people around you, but they are just not quite ready to think strategically and act independently. But we can get them there. You need a proven framework that will transform this team into high performing, self reliant leaders who will drive results with or without you. Yes, without you is the desired outcome in this, I promise. So the first thing that I'm offering is something I call an innovation engine blueprint. It's the guide. It is the framework that I use with all of my clients in some way, shape, or form, because it sets the tone for being strategic, becoming accountable, and delivering results. It will help you transfer strategy from inside of your head into your team, teach them how to experiment, like we talked about with Sarah a little bit, and challenge the status quo. It'll help you align those right people with the right process so that that business can grow and scale without you there. Yes, that means you can go on vacation. Yes, you can sit on the beach for 3 or 4 weeks at a time and not freak out. Okay.
Sounds amazing.
There's a second part to this, because if you're getting it, and guys, you gals, because let me be good here. This next piece is time with me. And it is something that I've never given to anybody except the clients inside of that Self-Reliant leadership team program. But it's the innovation clarity call. And we will spend about an hour together walking through your leadership team structure, figuring out where the bottlenecks are that slow down performance. And I will build with you a roadmap that you can use to help your leaders step into that high functioning place where they are driving growth. And you are no longer responsible for every decision that happens. If that sounds interesting to you and that resonates, I promise this is totally free. The easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. It's Lisa L. Levy. And yes, use the middle initial L, Levy, Levy, and drop a message in LinkedIn, one word, innovation. And I will get back to you personally, and I'll make sure that you get the Innovation Engine Blueprint, and we will coordinate and talk about the Innovation Clarity Call. If you want to learn more about everything that we do, the main website is lcubedconsulting.com, and the leadership program is outlined on lisallevy.com.
Okay, and I'll make sure that I put all those links as well as the link directly to your LinkedIn profile on the show notes, so people can just go click on it and make it easy.
Love to make it easy for the audience.
Yeah, definitely, because they're all busy gals and most of them might be driving at the moment as they're listening to this. So yeah, so what I'll do, Lisa, as well is with my podcast promotion, I also send out a newsletter. So I'll make sure that the audience, if you are driving at the moment, you'll also receive this in the newsletter. So you can go and click on those links. And the newsletter usually comes out about 24 hours directly after the episode, just to give that time for people to listen to the episode before the newsletter comes out. So
that's
that
absolutely fabulous.
So good. Thank you. And was there anything else you wanted to add before we finish off with this amazing? This was an amazing episode. We had so much fun.
This was a fabulous conversation. Rika, we went into all sorts of different places. Yeah. I'm sure that there was something we planned to talk about that we didn't, but I think that organically we came up with some other fun and good topics. So yeah. I guess the last parting thought that I have for the audience, leadership is something you can actually step into and control. You make choices. You are listening to this podcast to learn and expand your thinking. And I like to treat everything I do like an experiment. And if something that I'm doing isn't working, I stop, I kick it to the curb, and I look for that next idea. So the idea of innovation is part and parcel to how I conduct myself day in and day out. It is absolutely a process, and it is something that frees us from the guilt of saying, gosh, I just put all that time and energy into it and it didn't work. Who cares? You learned something. So learn, move on, and try the next thing.
I absolutely love that. I think that is going to be a big challenge for some people, but I love it. I love the challenge. Something that I love on this show is being honest and challenging the leaders. So every single episode has to have a challenge to it. So I think that was just it, is don't think that you wasted your time. No, you actually learned something and use that to start innovating. So thank you so much for this very amazing conversation. I love the fact that as women, we can just talk about things for real. We can get real with each other, and we can also just support the listeners on the show, because I think there's they're also special, and they're listening to the podcast literally, as you just said, because they want to learn. So good. Thank you so much for your time today, Lisa.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to the conversation.
Biggest pleasure ever. Speak soon. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts? It would mean so much to me to read your feedback. Also, it would really bless me big if you shared this episode with a fellow leader who might benefit from hearing today's message. And remember, put on the armor of God daily and walk by faith and not by sight. I'll meet you back on Monday for another episode.